We're recording. Okay, so tell me how you been. What's been going on?
I've been good. Just I really feel like it's made a difference. I know when we first talked, I said, well, it's not like you can just flip a switch and be better. And you said, well, it is kind of like that. And I think I'm convinced now that it is.
Yeah,
I'm still concerned about having the breaker flip and me being thrown back into the old way, but so
well,
far
just
so good.
assume that's going to happen. Just assume it. Don't be afraid of it. Just assume this isn't. I might have a switch flip, but if I don't necessarily fully grasp why, I might go back. But you know, what's the harm? You without this would always be over there, and you already know you can handle it, right?
Right.
Doing it for a long time now. So don't be afraid of that. If it happens, I find that people that are fearful of that relapse, and they have a very difficult time coming out of it because they feel like they've lost. They lost. They go back into victimization. I
Right.
just can't do it. They go into apathy around this doesn't work for me. Nothing's gonna work for me. So they go back into what they were doing that turned the switch off. So by looking at it ahead of time and giving yourself the grace, figuring it out, you're actually less likely to actually go way back down into that hopeless self, you know, deprecating failure, right?
Right. So if, say it does happen tomorrow, I just have a bad day and I binge.
That's not what's going to happen at all. That's not how binges ever happen.
Okay.
It will happen like this. Tomorrow, I feel bad about myself and think that my body's ugly and I decide I'm going to diet. Then I'll binge.
Okay. The
It's kind of,
deprivation will come first.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny when people say something like that. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have a bad day and then I'll binge. Well, no, if you keep on thinking that's how it happens, you'll never get out. You'll never recover because you're not looking at actually what happens, which is you put yourself in a position of being a victim. That's always first. Something in your life makes you think, well, it doesn't make you think because you think this way on your own without anybody making anything up, but something happens that's challenging or that you think shouldn't be this way. That happens first. You feel victimized by it or victimized by the extra work you have to do because of it, or by whatever thoughts you have about it. That creates tension and stress inside. Because you feel victimized, you want to consume food, but because you still have body image issues, you feel bad about food consumption. You feel bad about your weight. You decide you're going to go into dieting at some point, and then you give yourself an equal amount of food to your victimization, right? So you need compensation for how shitty your life is, and you're going to get equal amount of food, even if it causes all this weight gain, because you believe the illusion that with a diet, the weight gain will go away at some point. So, what really has to happen for this to be permanent is you have to decide, I am not a victim anymore. You have to kind of give yourself a very broad perspective on the way you're perceiving life in the world. Could you see too why, if you don't change that, why you'd be so nervous about a relapse?
Yeah, because it's not really a belief then. It's just something you're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, you mean the recovery?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying, I'm going to try not to smoke cigarettes, even though I still really enjoy, want, and believe that social smoking is what we should be doing, right? But I'm just going to arbitrarily try to quit because I read some article that it's unhealthy.
Right.
People know have read articles and research that it's unhealthy for decades. Never really gets them to quit because they still believe and want and hold on to these symbols that it provides for them. So you have to get rid of what the dieting and the body image provided for you first. Secondarily, you get rid of the symbolism that the food provided for you. Right?
Right.
So overall, how are you doing, like in general? With
I'm doing good.
Yeah, you feel good about it. Are you?
Yeah, I do feel good about it.
Are you surprised at how easy it's been?
Yeah, I am. That's why I think that I'm fearing the big crash, because it seems like it was too easy.
Yeah. So you go into forecast at this point. So I remember that feeling of knowing there are certain environments that I might not be able to think clearly in, have the clarity in, like going out socially in public, where food is around, like a potluck. I remember even thinking, if I at any point feel bad about how much I've eaten, right? And keep in mind, I had no context for what how recovery happened. I had no help. I had no assistance. I didn't go through a program, right? So I didn't really understand how I recovered. Intellectually, I didn't understand it in any way. So I just had feelings of vulnerability in certain environments, and I learned through whatever happened to me in how I recovered, that those points of vulnerability have to be surrendered to. That's how I got to where I was, and that's all I knew. So I remember thinking, I'm going to this barbecue potluck. I will just focus my energy on, I'm not going to worry about what I'm eating, because if I start to do that, that means I'm focusing in on my body image again and afraid of waking. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to eat when I'm hungry. I'm going to eat what I want to eat. No shame, no guilt, no judgment. And as soon as hunger's gone, I'm done. I'm not going to allow myself to go beyond that. And it's not because I was trying to be thin. It was because I was actually trying to remove any sense of vulnerability. Because I was aware at the time of that if I overate, that would create significant distress emotionally at the time. Even though I had fully surrendered to gaining weight, the physical feeling of it would have been stressful for me. So I allowed myself the burger and the potatoes and the real ranch dressing instead of something that was like 0-calorie vinegar, and ate and chewed and enjoyed. And then as soon as hunger went away, it was over, and I lived in that state of freedom. And I had to do that once or twice after the recovery process, whatever you want to call that. And I've never had vulnerability again. So I think some of that vulnerability for you is maybe you have not been tested yet. Am I wrong?
Could be. I went out with a couple friends for a happy hour.
And how was that?
And of course, they always want appetizers, and so it's, I'm used to just ordering my meal, eating it, whatever. Mm-hmm. But they like to order appetizers, and everybody shares it. So I was kind of concerned, like, oh gosh, what if I overdo it? And but I thought, no, just do it. And then I ended up bringing half my meal home anyway, which was unusual for me. Okay. Usually I sit and finish whatever's on my plate.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's a great example of being in that social environment where there's a lot more going on, a lot more food that looks palatable. You want to taste it, and then still being in touch with where my body's at, and really listening to its sense of fullness as fullness approaches, and being willing to stop, even though we ordered some dessert and we've got another cocktail and the chaos, right?
Oh yeah, because that was the next step. Then they ordered dessert. Come on, try it. And I really just didn't want it. It wasn't like I was, no, it's okay. I was comfortable where I was, and I just, no, it's okay. I didn't feel deprived when I left.
And it had nothing to do with your weight.
Right.
Now that's the key. That's the key to keeping this freedom. Right? It's being truthful about, I just don't want to feel sick. That is the truth. I've done that enough through binging and through this idea that I could fix it. So it changes the reason why you are putting a stop point or a boundary around food. It's like, I have a boundary. It's not like we're saying you're supposed to go beyond that because you can never diet again. That's what a lot of people assume when they start to hear the work that I do. They assume that I'm encouraging people to overconsume food, when in reality, I'm like, no, that's what diets do. Diets encourage that because they say they can fix all the damages that it causes. And diets also promote overconsumption because you get a sense of deprivation, isolation, and removal from your own culture. So you end up overcompensating when you are in your culture, thinking that you can also diet when it's over, right? It's like a diet sandwich with a binge in the center, So the reality is, when you actually separate your relationship with your body from your relationship with food, they're totally separate relationships that don't commingle. It's very simple. It's like, why would you eat till you're full? That's uncomfortable. You can't enjoy yourself when your pants get, the button is tight and you're burping and you have acid reflux and and you're having a hard time breathing and you're like, oh my God, I need to take a nap. It's the same thing with a relationship, let's say with drinking alcohol. It's kind of hard to have a good time when you're wasted and slurring your words and need someone to walk you around. Why would we create a boundary? Well, it shouldn't be because you're afraid to be an alcoholic. It should be because you don't like that feeling and it serves no purpose. So if we look at food in terms of the excessiveness when you eat it, it served a purpose for you before. And maybe that's what you're nervous about.
Yeah, probably.
What if I need it for that purpose and I still want it for that purpose? Because you may still have a link to food consumption and I'm a victim, or desirability around the freedoms and joys of food in an environment, where there's gluttony abound everywhere.
Well, I think too, a part of the fear is the overconsumption has often, when I can manage the diet, it's turned to something else, alcohol or shopping. So if I wasn't overeating and I was losing, maybe I started drinking more or spending too much.
So what does that tell you about the actual problem?
Feeling like the victim.
Yes, that's why I went there right at the beginning of this conversation.
Right, like that I deserve to be rewarded somehow because poor me.
This was unfair. I'm right, they're wrong, and I'm being... there's always a victim position when someone is using food excessively or compensating through some form of coping or reward system. So it's like, I worked really hard. I deserve some food. Well, that's like saying our foundation is to not work hard as human beings. To work hard, you need a reward, right? That's a sign, however, that what you're working hard for is something that doesn't bring you joy or gratification inherently, or close to, it's like extrinsic, and it's very far-reaching extrinsic, meaning you're just a slave to doing something with no benefit. So you need to find an interim benefit, They found this on a lot of human behavior research, is that when someone is forced to do something that is outside of their desire, wants, and needs, and the benefit is super far-reaching, or it benefits others, but it requires that they sacrifice time, effort, work, body, their need for a a form of compensation goes up. So if you don't get paid enough, you're going to go get more alcohol, or you're going to, you're going to abuse some form of narcotic, because it brings you, let me rephrase this. The narcotic removes your sense of, I'm a victim, because it's providing a sense of compensation and a physical sense of relaxation. So it's not just removing in that moment because you feel compensated the feelings of unfairness, but it actually is also removing the fight or flight reaction to that thought. Does that make sense? I think it's really unfortunate that people fixate on the narcotic connection to, let's just say, being an alcoholic or a shopaholic or whatever you want to call it, that they think that it's, or a gambling, they look at the outcome and fixate on the outcome, not realizing that, well, if we look at what precedes it, there's always a feeling of unfairness, inability. It goes back to survival mode, a sense of threat, a sense of I can't handle this, and a sense of inadequacy to the threat, or that it is unfair, it's happening to me, it's unjust, and I'm going to fight, right? So there's always a sense of survival mode underneath it. So there's a physiological response to that survival mode, but there's also the thought that positions you into it, the trigger or thought. So the thought of, give me an example for you, where something that would typically throw you into, poor me, this is so shitty, I'm going to go get some food, or I'm going to go shopping, or I'm going to have a glass of wine tonight. Give me an example of that for you.
I guess, well, I know a big one for me is if my husband and I have a fight, and we don't fight very often, but say we have a disagreement over something and I start to feel shitty, and then I start to, in my head, just go kind of nuts thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to leave me, it's over, my whole life that I've built to this point is going to just collapse, and it's been a farce. And
okay, so so I'm going to make an assumption that you feel inadequate with that.
Yes.
I can't handle it. Do you think in any way you're distorting it and blowing it up in your head to be bigger?
Oh yeah, majorly.
So why are you doing that? There's a reason why you do that. There's something you get out of it. Are you trying to manipulate him into feeling bad for having a position? Like if I feel like if I'm the wounded animal, he'll go, okay, I'm sorry.
Could be.
Yeah, that happens a lot. That is super, super manipulative. So you create him into being a huge, big, humongous persecutor. So you're blowing it up out of proportion to feel persecuted. Right? You see how you do that in your mind?
Yeah.
It's all over. It's over. I've lost everything. Even though in your mind, logically, you know that it's a lie. You're lying. You're blowing it out of proportion. And then you act on it. So then he has to retract what he's saying because you're so super sensitive and blowing it out of proportion. It's being catastrophized in a way. And you can...
Oh, yeah. Definitely is.
Do you not get that? Did I describe it okay? Is it accurate to the feeling when you're in it?
Yeah, I think my brain's still processing it because I never, ever thought of it that way, but I think it's accurate.
Yeah. So the catastrophizing of it, in a way, it's like playing, it's codependency, it's the drama triangle, Cartman's drama triangle to a T. You become the victim, but you create a magnified reaction to what he said or what he believes or the situation to promote your victimization and to promote him being the persecutor, so that he will remove his position because you have to win to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like magnifying a true feeling you have. I'm not saying you're lying about the feeling of inadequacy. You just magnify it as if he's the cause. Or that it is, again, catastrophizing it so that He has to retract his position, not you.
Right.
Sucks to be a narcissist, doesn't it? Yeah, because you're the one that suffers. And so that position, if he doesn't respond to it, can you see why then you've worked yourself into such a catastrophic situation that it is affecting your brain enzymes? But it's been created thinking that it would work in some way. I don't know. I could be wrong when I'm saying this, but this is super common.
Or you could be right.
Yeah. I don't know. You would be the one that have to listen to it, feel it out, and go yes or sometimes or whatever. So the catastrophizing of that situation, blowing it way out of proportion, and then believing your lie is true. So you lie about it. I have a client right now who is like 17, and she does this with her parents. So her parents will be like, "You can't do this in public." And she will lay on the ground and cry and sob as if they molested her, right? And treat them as if they were the worst.
It gets the response that she wants, though.
Yeah, because they get afraid that they are causing psychological damage because she's so sensitive, right? And she'll position herself and then text them terrible text messages about how horrible they are as parents because they did, right? They just gave her boundaries. And so she catastrophizes it, makes them the problem. And essentially, when you do that, you're trying to get the person holding you responsible for your behavior. You're trying to get them to back out so you don't have to take responsibility for what you said, what you've done, how you're acting, or where you've gone wrong. Ultimately, if there is no consequence to that behavior, this girl, over the years, has literally created, she's so much, she's like 12, she's 17, but she's actually in a 12-year-old emotional state of awareness because she's never really had to take responsibility because of this catastrophizing that she's done with her parents. And as her and I have talked about it, she's willing to admit it because she's dealing with severe issues socially with narcotics and with an eating disorder, right? So can you see if it's not tended to, people this is how they function in adulthood. And she looks normal, right? She's perceived as normal in her peer group because her peer group is kind of at that level. And if that's how she's functioning with her parents, what will happen when she gets into a relationship, how she'll function if there's a boundary issue with a friendship or a boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, how that will impact that relationship when she catastrophizes them saying, why would you do that? Why did you do that? And then she gets into her, I'm a weak animal and you are me, how that will, someone who's unaware of that will go, oh, I'm so sorry, because no one wants to do that to someone else, and then they just get manipulated. So what you're doing when you reach for some type of compensation is when you start to feel angry about your mistreatment, that he is not responding to this. He doesn't care about me. If he cared, he would care that I'm hurt. Make sense?
Oh, yeah. It makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So that victim positionality has got to go. So what happens when you let go of that victim position? So let's just say you and him get in an argument again. What's going to happen if you're not allowed to create catastrophe out of the situation? In your own defensiveness, right? Unwillingness to look at yourself. What happens if there's no way to compensate for it?
I have to look at myself.
Yes, and you're going to have to take responsibility for where there's truth. You have to tell the truth. You can't lie anymore to yourself and to everybody around you and expect them to just deal with the damage that you're causing. Because I don't have to take responsibility because they're not nice to me. They don't care about me. You have to own up. And by taking responsibility, it's like holding yourself to your inner truth. It's like, where am I at really? If I had to tell the truth, everything came out. It'd be a lot easier, don't you think? I mean, you're living in vulnerability, but what work do you have to do? Think about how different it would be functioning with your husband. You think it would be a lot easier, a lot less messy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, because it's not easy when, things go along fine, and then we have one of these hiccups. It's like the bottom falls out, and it's a terrible thing to... It would be just nice to deal with things before they escalate to that point.
Yeah, right? So that's something to think about if you want to contemplate those times where you were wrong and you were not willing to even look at it. You were in denial, wouldn't admit it, and project it onto him as the problem. Go back in those moments and admit it to yourself where you went wrong in your own approach to it, and then apologize now. Discuss it now. Does he know you're working with me?
No.
That's amazing. I swear, how many women don't tell their husbands what they're doing when it comes to getting work like this? I don't care if you do or don't, but it's just funny to me.
Right.
I probably wouldn't tell my husband either, so just saying.
Well, because his response would be, "Oh, you're fine. There's nothing wrong. Just why are you spending that money on that? And we have our own money, so
yeah,
it's not like I'm sneaking his money to do this.
It's just private." Yeah, well, also it's okay to say I'm not okay and I've got some help and I want to talk about some things that we're talking about because it has to do with you and me and my response to you, or not. I'm not telling you to do anything, but those are
sure.
Just
and I mean, if I had to, I would just have a discussion about it. I just didn't think it was necessary.
No, it's not. It's not. I'm not telling you to do it. I was just, getting details. But so yeah, I mean, we can sit here and the thing about this whole thing, when you look at it, you wouldn't have an eating issue if you didn't have to start a victim position with your body.
Mm-hmm.
You're victimized by your own body, the one that is providing you life, air. I mean, it's not providing you air, but it's doing all of the mechanisms of the body, do it without your thought. There's very little thought that goes into how we manage our body. We breathe, we sleep, we brush our teeth. When we're hungry, we eat. When we have to go to the bathroom, we go to the bathroom. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It really does everything for us. It's telling us to do what we need to do. So when you look at the body, you're victimized by the one thing that's providing you consciousness here. And then you're feeling bad about it because it doesn't have the right amount of leanness, or it's got too much fatness, based on some cultural dogma that's out there telling you that your body's flawed. Right? So you victimize yourself. My body sucks. It's taking away my status symbol. I need to be a higher, holier person, and the body's fat. It's taking that away from me. And the leanness gives it to me. So you fixate on the body, trying to maintain a status symbol. Right? And what you have to do to keep the status symbol is starve yourself, restrict, focus, make organized. You have to really focus in and eliminate all the other access of thoughts and creativity in life, right? So now you're victim to the means that you're using to the end of thinness. So you're not just victim to the body, you're now victim to what you got to do to get there. And then you're eating food to basically give yourself some sense of reward for it all, developing relationships with food that have to do with other ideas of victimization in your life, only because you think you're going to go back into restricting to fix the weight gain, to get back to this leanness that the dogma is telling you to do. So you're just a perpetual slave. You know? So this recovery can be very, very quick. It sounds complicated, but when you surrender thin supremacy, you are surrendering your superiority. So you surrender the narcissistic idea of I am better than you. Then you go into I accept that I am a lesser human being based on that belief system, right? And you accept it. The key is that you are okay with that. So many people get stuck on, I could do that, but I feel bad about it. I'm going to feel bad about it the rest of my life. Well, that means they're not accepting it. Accepting means that I am okay with it. I'm neutral about it. Right? Have you felt that way yet?
I think so. I do, I feel okay with looking at myself in the mirror, but I do kind of catch myself, getting the side view, doing the body checking stuff that I heard you talk about on other videos.
Yes, so you can tell there's maybe some, is there a coordinated need? Are you concerned about gaining weight? Is that why you're body checking? It's just to see what's happening?
Maybe.
Making sure you don't gain more weight?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so that's why you're having this nervousness or on a relapse. Because if you start to gain weight, what's going to happen?
I'll probably be thinking about my next diet.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that comes second, right? What comes first? What becomes first before thinking about a diet?
Feeling like a victim.
Yes, and having that internal rage increase. This is bad, I gotta do something, this is embarrassing, this is terrible. So it's catastrophizing the body.
Yes.
Yeah. I have to do something about it. This is horrible. I feel like shit. Then you'll project that onto me. Robin told me not to diet. How is this okay? Right?
So how do you, if you're a super sensitive person, how do you not be a super sensitive person?
Well, that's like claiming that is that something, like that's a personality trait? That's not a personality trait, dearie. That's a sign of survival mode. So basically what you're saying is, Robin, how do I get out of survival mode? Don't claim I'm a sensitive person. That's not something to be proud of. That is like, especially when there's no reason for it. Right? That's like saying, I'm really weak and incapable. How do I stop being weak and incapable? I'm really short-sighted, Robin, as a person. How do I stop being short-sighted? Make sense? It's like,
but I know that's a flaw in myself.
No, it's not. It's a symptom of survival mode, which would make sense if there was an actual...
Can you explain survival? Like, give me a definition for survival mode.
So, awesome question. Or awesome that you asked this. So, survival mode is actually really important. Well, there's an area of the brain dedicated to it, and we could actually, have gratitude for it, because we would not be here from thousands of years of existence if it didn't exist. So it's wired to be there when you're being chased by a bear. Don't you think if you see a bear and you see that this is an animal much bigger than me, that you might in your mind create, this could kill me. So you're magnifying the threat of that bear. Could you see why that would be important?
Yes.
You are walking next to a cliff and all of a sudden you get a sense of dying. Can you see why that magnification of that threat would be important?
Right.
Do you get my point?
Yes.
Really quite important.
The fight or flight kind of.
That's what we're talking about, survival mode, which is a magnification of threat in the brain. Okay. This will kill you. Life and death. So you're basically saying, Robin, I magnify everything as terrible. So there's a few things that we can look at that and go, well, someone's sense of ability can diminish that threat. Like, there's an awareness of your environment, and then there's an awareness of my ability in that environment. It's not just one-sided. It's multifaceted, right? There's a bear. I have a gun. There's a bear. Or there's, you know what I'm saying? Like, I have tools and weaponry. There's a way to defend yourself. Right. So the need to find an attachment to defend yourself when you alone, when it's between me and a grizzly bear, I'm going to die. If it is hungry, right? So it's circumstantial. If I throw rocks at the bear, I'm going to die. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's circumstances, there's layers and layers of things around it. So when you look at how you've catastrophized your husband, for example, in those moments, that's a symptom of survival mode. And it works under certain circumstances. I can't survive without him. Is it him you can't survive with, or is it the environment you can't survive with, right? So we can also create survival mode by losing, like, for example, my weapon. If I lose this weapon, I'm incapable. So if we look at, if I lose my husband, I'm incapable of being alone. Can you see now why you would want to manipulate your husband?
Yes.
So it's a sense, that's why I said to you earlier, oh, you just don't think you're capable. That's a sense of, I am inadequate. There is an intrinsic sense of inadequacy. So if you feel to the core inadequate, can you see why you're sensitive?
Yeah.
Yeah. It has everything, it has nothing to do with your environment so much as it does to do with you. So what you're trying to do is manipulate the environment to accommodate you, to be down at your level. Then you get a sense of, I can handle it. So that's why we call it, you're super controlling, right? And then we're going to praise you and say, you're type A. Now, a lot of people don't connect those dots. You're type A. That's someone who's super controlling, all or nothing. Super perfectionistic sounds like someone who is inherently really insecure. And they are overreaching. And they are in survival mode. Now, let's not judge it, because if I had that, and that was that I'm trying to survive, and most people don't know that's what they're doing. They're totally unaware. They're just living primally, in their primal state of mind. OCD. Stuck in survival mode. And it's somewhat extreme. It's not all or nothing. There's grades of it, right? Someone who is lenient, someone who is gracious. You know, there's always points of diminishing returns to that, where you get into apathy, right? I might as well do nothing. You know, that there's a point where it's no longer, I'm confident, into, I might as well do nothing because I'm a piece of shit and it's never going to work out anyways. That's different. That is you're in hiding. You're in fight or flight. You're in survival mode, but you're like, I might as well stay in my cave because I can't handle any animals out there, and then I feel punished by my cave, right? That's like someone in paralysis. That's very different than someone who is out of survival mode, willing to get out of the cave. They're willing to do work, but they're not going to sit there and stay in the cave in fear of dying, or blame other people for not protecting them and, you know, in vulnerability, right? So the animal part of you is feeling totally in threat. So sensitivity means you are sensitive to threat in survival mode. And it could be for a variety of reasons, right? That's ultimately why you're overreaching with thin supremacy. That whole point of seeking out some form of superiority is a fight or flight fear of being seen as inferior, which will increase your threat of the illusion of being rejected, abandoned, and disapproved of. Especially if you have made connections with people that you think is based on your superiority. You're attached to the superiority as what you think people like about you. Right? Does this make any sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So the goal is that you tell the truth about who you are and you stop presenting this narcissistic superiority in your mind and to others. That you go into, I am what I am, and if that's inferior, let's just start with that, because that's truthful and it requires no work on my part. It requires no insanity, no overreaching, no compensations. I don't have to try to manipulate people. I can just present who I really am. And if that's not good enough, I accept rejection, abandonment, and disapproval. This is like getting out of that third hierarchy of need, or getting that third need as pack animals to survival, getting it secure. Because we all really are looking at security. We're looking at security physiologically. Do I have food? Do I have clean water? Do I have a way to wash my hands? Do I have a way somewhere to go to the bathroom? Do I have things that protect me from the elements? We're all looking for that sense of security, right? The most sensitive, I think, at this point and in our culture is, am I a quality human being that can be accepted into a tribe as a pack animal? I need others to survive, but am I a valuable human being? And the problem is that you don't feel that intrinsically, so you're looking for validation from others to feel it. So if you're looking for validation from others, then can you see why you would catastrophize someone like your husband if you're over reliant on him to feel that sense of I am a worthy human being because he loves me, because I have a man, or because of whatever it is. If you're over reliant on him, can you see then why you would catastrophize him, saying that's wrong, don't treat me that way, or you got to stop doing this, where he would give you a boundary, why you would catastrophize it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Say that again. You're breaking up. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, say that again.
It's all true. It makes a lot of sense, and I never really looked at it this way, so.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it, you'll recognize that anybody in this situation who feels like this, who position themselves this way, and this is what they're aware of, they don't know any different, would do the same, because it's human. This is a very primal human response. If I feel that inadequate, I'm going to want to reach for something to validate that I am somewhat adequate. And that's why we have these social structures. One of the downsides to it is when people start using it to validate their need to be accepted into a tribe. So you overreach and cling to programs such as religion, body image, consumerism, and all of these things that have become a huge part of kind of the evidence of the mental health crisis that we have in the United States. It's like, and the sucky part about it is the system thrives on this survival mode. You're spending money as a survival tool. Like, I'm going to buy this diet. So you're consuming a weapon to survive. The diet is a weapon to my thinness, which will support and supply that narcissistic supply of superiority, which is my validation of, it's like that I'm sexy and my husband will like me, that I am perceived as a superior woman in my group of women that I hang out with. I feel secure now in myself, even though it's not in yourself at all. It's not self-security in any way. It's system thin supremacy security, right? So you inherently stay insecure because it's not a self-securing pack animal relationship. It's a needy, codependent with body image relationship with others. It would make sense too that if we remove the one thing you've been using for years to feel somewhat attractive to others and as validation, like when others are attracted to me physically, that's validating that I have something of value, right? If we surrender that your underlying insecurities within yourself, your own sense of self-security, take everybody out of it, that would then be magnified in your own sense of insecurity in public, right? if I go out and I see someone who is more beautiful than me, I might relapse.
Yeah. So.
So what do we do, right?
Yeah, right.
Well,
it's coming.
Well, if you look at this from a distance, first of all, don't judge yourself. It would be easy to judge because it seems really immature. You're an adult. Why are we still living in junior high? But it's not junior high. This is survival mode. Don't judge that. I don't feel secure, first of all, because I've been targeting food, which stimulates survival mode. You can't get out of it. That's the most primal need to survive. So immediately as you diet, your brain is swelling, super inflammation. But the cause of that is the fact that you do not feel like you are a worthy human being at your core, authentically. So remove your clothes, remove the house, remove the facade, right? I used to visualize it as scaffolding, right? I'm building this facade, and there's scaffolding, and people can't get to the truth of what's in here. They don't know that there's nothing in here, right? The goal is that you remove anything that you're hiding. That if it feels like you are a piece of shit, that why don't you where does that come from, first of all? You can't just feel bad about who you are. That doesn't just happen. There is a belief in place that you are using to compare yourself to then define your worthlessness. So is it that you're not smart enough? What belief is in place? So if we remove body image, if we remove your house, we remove your material goods, we remove your consumability, we remove whatever it is, and you're left completely spiritually, emotionally, and physically buck-ass naked for everybody to see. What's your initial feel of that?
Well, I think that is a big part of it. Is, am I smart enough?
Yeah, I don't know why I went there first, but I wonder if did we talk about that in our last session?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
We did talk about that.
So that's right, the dumbness. What if it's true? So go into that. So that belief didn't come from you. You weren't born with this idea that smart people are better people. That didn't just happen. At some point, you believed it, and it's believed dogmatically. I think this is an important thing for you to see. Do you know what dogma is?
Yeah, you talked about that, that it's an unquestionable belief
given to you by an authority. So it's not your belief. It is, however, when you internalize it. The word they use when they look at brainwashing is internalization. Once someone says, yes, I agree, then it's internalized and it becomes part of their own sense of value that they think is theirs. So it becomes my value system. So you attach me to it. So at some point, and we could say, of course, intellectualism is a dogmatic belief out there for people who feel inadequate, maybe, if you, again, go back to junior high, you can see it very clearly how people segregate and start sectioning themselves off into groups. There's the smart group, there's the athletic group, there's the hot and sexy group, there's the pot smoking group, there's the group of people who feel like their life has been destroyed and they are the victim group. There's it's like it happens. You can just see it as children develop into adulthood. You can see that part of that brain inflame. Some of it could be intentional, like that's what the brain's supposed to do as we get into adulthood. Let's not judge junior high. I don't want to come across that way.
No, but I can, as soon as you say that, I can put myself right back there and trying to fit into a group and feel accepted. And I can live it like it was yesterday.
Yes, and no one really questions the dogma they internalized when they were 12. Partly because your parents may have believed that. What your parents internalize and promote in you to be secure, it would be very easy for you in your innocence as a child to go, yes, okay, I want my parents to love me. I will do what they believe is right as a human being, and I want to be right. And in my rightness, you start to make other people wrong, and that's where those divisions start. So you have to really look at, well, if I am authentically and truthfully not smart, just go into the fear of that. Because I'm pretty sure you can look at the evidence and say that's a funny joke, because I clearly have intelligence. My ability to work, memorize all these goddamn dumbass diets. You could have a PhD in how to starve yourself. How many ways can we starve without perceiving it as starvation? Right?
Yeah. Oh, I could probably write out the outline for about the last 30 diets to come down the pike.
Oh yeah, and they've come down real fast. Over 5 years. Real fast.
I've been on every single one of them, right?
Oh yeah, and every one of them makes sense to you. Every one of them seems promising to you. Everyone seems healthy. They've done a really good job through that media. They know exactly what it's going to take for you to go, this is healthy, and then to impose it, even though it's got terrible, like the HCG diet. Terribly unhealthy psychologically. Now I say that as because it is different than the HCG protocol. Totally different approaches, right? Anyway, so look at that belief and question it. So when we look at the studies of brainwashing and how to get people out of that type of Stockholm syndrome, right? Cultural Stockholm syndrome is when they start to question the dogmatic beliefs that they never questioned. They just internalize it as sacred truths, never to be questioned or looked at, so you don't have to think about those beliefs. You just internalize them. There's no thought to those beliefs. You just hold them as a standard. So they become like an anchor in how you perceive things. When it's dogmatic, again, it's a sacred truth you don't have to think about. You don't have to, it's just an anchor of the way things are, and then from there you think outwardly. So this entire thought process of thin supremacy is anchoring how you perceive your body, other people's body, in the entire relationship you've had with food up to this point. And you see why in a culture that uses thin supremacy as an anchored dogmatic belief system, why even the science of food addiction doesn't look at the actual restriction as why the brain is so sensitive to food that stimulates the hedonic brain. They believe it too. I mean, they believe in thin supremacy as well. So why would they look at that? Isn't that just a sacred truth that we all want? Because they're super brainwashed, right? How many nutritionists out there? I mean, there's statistics. I think this is like 30% of all nutritionists have an eating disorder. They're attracted to the micromanagement of nutrition for a reason. I can't tell you how many PhD nutritionists I've actually worked with.
Well, it must be super confusing for them because they believe that they have the education to back it, but they're so mixed up inside as well.
Well, it's not an intellectual problem. They can intellectualize a linear idea of what food is all they want, but the reality of how our brain works psychologically around food all that is meaningless, right? Okay. Especially when it comes to all the micromanagement that it's required to do what they've logically said in their mind is great. It requires some form of psychological problem, and that's where their misery comes in, and why they would be like, I've got problems. Why would I? I mean, that doesn't make sense. I'm supposed to be focusing on my macros and my micros. But anyways. So,
tell me again, the Stockholm, what is it, theory? I'm going to look that up.
Well, it's called Stockholm syndrome. It's when
syndrome. Okay.
Yeah, it's actually the actual definition of it is when someone is being held hostage. So it's a hostage situation where it's a phenomenon where the person being held hostage feels love and companionship with their captor. And they study why. So this person who has been held hostage violently, right? Why would they defend their captor? and it's a phenomenon that they've seen over and over and over again. And they see it a lot in cults, where there's a religious cult where there's clearly abuse going on. How do they allow that? And why would they defend it? They've seen it in cultures, not just subcultures. They've seen it in culture. Look at foot binding in China. Centuries and centuries, I think close to 1,000 years, they bound the feet of women to the point where they couldn't walk. Passed down generation to generation. Why would they do that?
Because that's what they were taught to do.
And they're taught that when they do that, they're superior beings, and they increase, their status symbol goes up. It's monetary value. It's a marriage value. And so you're given a sense of value and security in your tribe, but it requires that you are disabled. You can't walk. You are now easily controlled, manipulated, right? So you're being held hostage. If you look at it, you now are positioning yourself to be held hostage, but then given a sense of superiority or well-being because of it. So there's reasons around the syndrome. It's not just one thing. That's why it's a syndrome. They're controlling. So they found with this syndrome that in all cases, your food is being controlled. Your access to physiological survival needs is being manipulated, used as punishment, as reward. And the weird thing about it is when you're being held hostage and food is given to you, you can confuse it with they're being kind to me. So instead of it being this is humane, and by starving me that's inhumane, it becomes a new normal that you only get fed when you're kind, when you do what you're told. Right? And so the act of eating is no longer accepted as normal. It is accepted as reward. Oh, I wonder what does that sound similar to? Maybe your diet problem? So it distorts the actual response in the brain to feeling gratitude for someone giving you food, even though shouldn't that be expected in a first world country? That if I'm starving, you shouldn't starve in a first world country. You know what I'm saying? But you're being told that starving is why you're accepted. So there's a combination of manipulating your food and actual survival needs, and the sense of safety in the tribe security as well. That you're loved and you're appreciated but there's always conditions around it. So there are punishments if you don't. So the key that they found too is when the individual being held hostage internalizes the belief system that they're being punished and rewarded for, that's when it all starts to become, they hold themselves hostage. They don't need to be held hostage. They are now holding themselves hostage. They don't need the person, and they're more willfully punishing themselves because they believe in the system that says I am worthy of punishment. So they see this a lot in religious cults. So that's what I believe, that when I'm talking to you, it is a syndrome. I'm essentially trying to get you to leave the cult, like someone being held hostage, or a battered wife syndrome. Similar. Battered wife syndrome is like a form of Stockholm syndrome. Why is this woman willfully accepting this type of abuse? She's clearly being abused. Why is she staying? So they believe they call it battered wife syndrome, similar to Stockholm syndrome. She's willfully staying in an environment that is toxic and destructive. Make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So that's what I'm writing about, is this idea that maybe the eating disorder is actually a syndrome that is more about body image. And your social pack animal needs to be loved. And there's just a system that says you'll be loved if you starve yourself and become thin. So now we're combining what they've seen in Stockholm syndrome, which is manipulating survival needs, using food as reward, using deprivation as punishment, and the idea that you are lovable when you're thinner. very similar to foot binding. Your status symbol gets higher in the cult if you're thinner. You get more power, prestige. The symbolism of your magical goes up. Your specialness goes up. We'll give you specialness. You just have to starve yourself. And if you've done something wrong, you have to starve even more. You know, no one's looking at that, especially since the diet industry promotes it in such a self-righteous way. No one really looks at it as detrimental, because the idea in the system is that if you are fat, you deserve to starve. What's wrong with you? You deserve, just stop eating, right? It's a very common thought for people who are in that system. It's just terrible when you get out of it. You look at it and go, this is really messed up. And we never see it. No one sees it in there because they just internalized it, similar to someone who is being held hostage in a terribly abusive cult. So think of this from a cult vantage point. If you found out there was a cult that held women hostage, said you will be free when you are starved enough, and we're going to praise you for doing it, and we're going to give you stature. And if you've done something, if you eat, and if you eat too much, you're going to go into a room to starve. And that room is your diet, Can you see why then we would want to hide if you're binging?
Yeah, right.
Why you're embarrassed that I'm eating? I'm embarrassed that I'm eating. I don't want people to know. Or why you have to excuse the fact that you're eating? I have to have an excuse to eat. So I don't feel like I'm doing something wrong. So, all right. Gotta go. So let's schedule our next session.